Sarah rushed down the wet street, her shoes splashing in puddles as the rain poured down. She kept checking her watch, only 20 minutes until her job interview, and the bus stop was still 2 blocks away. This job meant everything to her. After being laid off 3 months ago, her savings were almost gone. The rent was due next week, and her fridge held little more than a half-empty carton of milk and some leftovers. As she reached the bus stop, her heart dropped. The bus was pulling away, its red taillights glowing through the rain. Sarah's shoulders slumped. The next bus wouldn't come for another 30 minutes. She would miss her interview, and with it, her chance at a fresh start. She stood there, water dripping from her hair, not knowing what to do next. Her carefully ironed shirt was getting soaked, and her folder with her resume was turning damp at the edges. Sarah felt tears mixing with the raindrops on her face. Just then, a small blue car slowed down beside her. The passenger window rolled down, and an elderly woman with silver hair and kind eyes looked out at her. "You look like you could use a ride, dear," the woman said with a warm smile. "This rain is awful today." Sarah hesitated. Her mother had always warned her about getting into cars with strangers, but there was something trustworthy about this woman's face, with its web of wrinkles that spoke of years of smiling. "I'm heading downtown if that helps," the woman added. "Actually, I have a job interview," Sarah said, making up her mind. "It's at the Riverside office building on Main Street." "Hop in," the woman said. "I'm Ruth, by the way." Sarah climbed into the passenger seat, grateful to be out of the rain. The car smelled of peppermint and had a small wooden cross hanging from the rearview mirror. A knitted blanket lay folded on the back seat. "I'm Sarah," she said, buckling her seatbelt. "Thank you so much for stopping. I thought I was going to miss my interview." Ruth pulled back into traffic. "What kind of job are you interviewing for?" "It's an office assistant position at a law firm," Sarah explained, trying to dry her folder with a tissue from her purse. "It's not my dream job, but it pays well and has good benefits." "Sometimes the jobs we don't dream about lead us to places we never imagined," Ruth said. She drove carefully through the rain-slicked streets. "I was a nurse for 40 years. Never planned it, but it gave me a wonderful life." They talked easily as Ruth drove. Sarah learned that Ruth was a widow who volunteered at the hospital 3 days a week. Ruth heard about Sarah's struggle to find work and her hopes for this new position. When they reached the office building, Sarah had 10 minutes to spare. She turned to thank Ruth, reaching for her wallet. "Please, let me give you something for gas," she said. Ruth shook her head firmly. "Not a chance. Just do well in your interview, and maybe someday, when you see someone else who needs help, remember this moment." Sarah nodded, her throat tight with emotion. "I will." "Good luck, dear," Ruth said as Sarah got out. Sarah walked into the building with her head high. The rain had stopped, and a patch of blue sky peeked through the clouds. She took it as a good sign. 3 hours later, she walked out with a job offer. The first person she wished she could tell was Ruth. The kind stranger had done more than give her a ride. She had restored Sarah's faith that good people still existed in the world. Sarah made a promise to herself that day. She would be someone else's Ruth when the chance came. Mike yawned as he tied his black apron around his waist. The coffee shop opened at 6 in the morning, and he was always the first one there. Outside, the December air was cold enough to see his breath. The streets were quiet, with only a few cars passing by. Most people were still warm in their beds. As Mike unlocked the front door of the coffee shop, he noticed a man sitting on the bench across the street. The man wore a thin jacket that was too small for him. His beard was long and his hair was messy. Mike had seen him before. Most days, the man sat on that same bench, watching people walk by. Mike went inside and started his morning tasks. He turned on the lights, fired up the coffee machines, and checked the pastry case. Through the window, he could still see the man on the bench. He was rubbing his hands together, trying to stay warm. Poor guy, Mike thought. He had walked past the man many times without stopping. Today, something felt different. Maybe it was the extra cold weather, Or maybe it was the man's sad eyes. Mike decided to do something. He made a large cup of hot chocolate, adding extra whipped cream on top. He also put 2 fresh muffins in a paper bag. Taking a deep breath, Mike walked out of the shop and crossed the street. "Good morning," Mike said, holding out the hot chocolate. "I thought you might like something warm today." The man looked up, surprised. People usually walked past him without even looking his way. He took the cup with shaking hands. "Thank you," he said in a quiet voice. "My name's Joe." "I'm Mike. I work at the coffee shop." Mike pointed to the building behind him. "Do you mind if I sit for a minute?" Joe moved over, making room on the bench. His clothes smelled like they hadn't been washed in a long time. But Mike sat down anyway. "I brought some muffins too," Mike said, offering the paper bag. "Blueberry and chocolate chip." Joe took the bag slowly, as if he couldn't believe it was for him. "Why are you being nice to me?" he asked. Mike thought about it. "I see you here almost every day. I guess I was curious about your story." Joe took a sip of the hot chocolate, leaving a bit of whipped cream in his mustache. "Not much to tell. I used to work construction. Then I got sick. Hospital bills took all my money. Lost my apartment. Been on the streets for 8 months now." Mike nodded. He hadn't expected such a simple story. Joe could have been anyone. A neighbor, a coworker, a friend. He had just had some bad luck. They talked until Mike had to go back to work. Joe told him about his life before becoming homeless. He had a daughter somewhere in another state. He used to coach Little League baseball. He liked fishing and watching old westerns on TV. The next morning, Mike arrived at work with a bag in his hand. Inside was a warm winter coat that had been sitting in his closet for years. He hadn't worn it since college. It was dark blue with a thick lining, perfect for the cold weather. Joe was on his bench as usual. His face lit up when he saw Mike coming. "I brought you something," Mike said, holding out the coat. "It doesn't fit me anymore, and it's just taking up space in my closet." Joe stood up slowly. He took off his thin jacket and put on the warm coat. It fit him perfectly. His eyes filled with tears. "Thank you," he said, his voice breaking. "I don't know what to say." "You don't need to say anything," Mike replied. "But I have 15 minutes before my shift starts. Maybe you could tell me more about those baseball teams you coached." Joe smiled, and for a moment, Mike could see the man he used to be. Proud, confident, happy. They sat together on the cold bench, their breath making white clouds in the morning air, sharing stories like old friends. Emma sat cross-legged on her bedroom floor, counting the coins from her piggy bank. At 8 years old, she had been saving her allowance for months. She wanted to buy a new bicycle with a basket and streamers on the handlebars. So far, she had $43.27. "Emma, dinner's ready," her mother called from downstairs. "Coming, Mom." Emma scooped the coins back into her piggy bank and ran down to the kitchen. Her parents were already at the table. The news was playing on the small TV in the corner. Emma sat down and reached for the bowl of mashed potatoes. On the TV, a woman was talking about the children's hospital. Many of the children receiving treatment don't have toys to play with during their long hospital stays. The woman said, "We're asking for donations to bring some joy to these brave kids." Emma stopped eating. She thought about her own toys, her stuffed animals, her dolls, her games. She couldn't imagine being sick in a hospital without anything to play with. "Mom," she said suddenly, "can we take my piggy bank money to buy toys for the kids at the hospital?" Her mother looked surprised. "But honey, you've been saving for your new bike. Are you sure?" Emma nodded. "I can save for my bike again. But those kids need toys now." The next day, Emma's parents took her to the toy store. She walked slowly down each aisle, thinking carefully about what to buy. She picked out soft stuffed animals for the little kids. For the older ones, she chose coloring books, crayons, and small games that could be played in bed. "These are great choices. the store clerk said as she rang up Emma's items. "Are these for a birthday party?" "They're for the kids at the hospital," Emma explained. "They don't have toys to play with." The clerk smiled. "That's very kind of you." When they arrived at the hospital, a nurse named Ms. Chen met them in the lobby. She had a kind face and wore bright pink scrubs with cartoon characters on them. "I'd like to donate these toys," Emma said, suddenly feeling shy. Ms. Chen knelt down to Emma's level. "This is wonderful. Would you like to tell me what made you decide to do this?" Emma explained about seeing the news and emptying her piggy bank. Ms. Chen's eyes grew wide. "You gave up your bicycle money?" she asked. Emma nodded. "It's okay. The kids here need the toys more than I need a new bike." Ms. Chen gave Emma a tour of the playroom, where children who were well enough could come to play. The room was bright and cheerful, but there weren't many toys. Emma's donations would help fill the empty shelves. As they were leaving, Emma saw a girl about her age sitting in a wheelchair in the hallway. The girl looked sad and was staring out the window. "Can I give her one of the stuffed animals?" Emma asked Ms. Chen. "That would be very nice," the nurse replied. Emma walked over to the girl and held out a soft purple elephant. "Hi, I'm Emma. I brought this for you." The girl looked up, surprised. "For me? Really?" "Yes," Emma said. "It's super soft and good for hugging." The girl took the elephant and hugged it tight. "Thank you. I'm Lily. I've been here for 2 weeks, and it gets boring." "Maybe I can come back someday, and we can play together," Emma suggested. Lily's face brightened. "I'd like that." On the way home, Emma was quiet, thinking about Lily and the other children at the hospital. "Are you sad about your bike money?" her father asked. Emma shook her head. "No. I'm just thinking that maybe my friends at school might want to help too. If we all brought in toys, every kid at the hospital could have something special." Emma's parents exchanged proud glances. Their daughter's simple act of kindness was already growing into something bigger. David noticed the problem while mowing his lawn on a hot Saturday afternoon. His neighbor, Mr. Chen, was struggling with his own yard work. The elderly man would push his mower a few feet, then stop to catch his breath. His face was red, and sweat dripped from his forehead. David had lived next door to Mr. Chen for 3 years. They always waved to each other, but rarely talked. David knew that Mrs. Chen had died 6 months ago. Since then, Mr. Chen had been living alone in the small blue house. David finished his own lawn, then walked over to his neighbor's yard. Mr. Chen was now sitting on his porch steps, looking tired. "Afternoon, Mr. Chen," David called. "That's some hot work for today." Mr. Chen nodded. "Too hot for an old man, I think. But the grass won't cut itself." David looked at the yard. Only a small part was mowed. "Would you mind if I finished it for you? My mower is already out and running." Mr. Chen shook his head firmly. No, I cannot ask you to do my work." "You didn't ask. I offered," David said with a smile. "Besides, I could use the exercise." Before Mr. Chen could object again, David went back to get his mower. He quickly finished the front yard, then moved to the back. The whole job took less than 30 minutes. When he was done, Mr. Chen came out with 2 glasses of cold lemonade. "Please, you must take a break now." David accepted the drink gratefully. They sat together on the porch steps, watching birds in the maple tree. "My wife made the best lemonade," Mr. Chen said quietly. "This is her recipe." "It's excellent," David said. "How long were you married?" 47 years, Mr. Chen replied. "We came to America together in 1975. Both of us were 20 years old and knew no English." David whistled. "That must have been hard." Mr. Chen nodded. "Hard, yes, but we had each other." He looked at his half-mowed backyard. "Many things are harder alone." The next weekend, David mowed Mr. Chen's lawn again without being asked. When he finished, Mr. Chen tried to pay him $20. Please, I must give you something for your work, the old man insisted. David shook his head. I don't want money. But, he paused. I've always wanted to learn to play chess. I noticed your chess set through the window. Maybe you could teach me. Mr. Chen's face brightened. You want to learn chess? From me? If you have time, David said. For chess, I always have time, Mr. Chen said, smiling for the first time since his wife died. That Sunday, they had their first lesson. Mr. Chen was a patient teacher, explaining each piece and its moves. David was a quick learner, though he lost every game. The chess lessons became a weekly tradition. Sometimes they played on Mr. Chen's porch. Other times they sat at David's kitchen table. They talked while they played. About Mr. Chen's life in China, about David's job as an accountant, about books they had read and places they had visited. David kept mowing Mr. Chen's lawn every weekend. In the fall, he raked the leaves. In the winter, he shoveled the snow from the driveway. One day, as they were setting up the chess pieces, Mr. Chen said, You know, when Lin died, I thought my life was over too. I had no children, no close family here, just an old man alone in a quiet house. He moved his first pawn. But now I have a chess student who needs many more lessons, so I must stick around. David smiled as he moved his own pawn. What had started as a simple act of kindness had given both of them something they needed. Mr. Chen had a friend, and David had found the grandfather he never had. Maria had been a teacher at Pine Grove Elementary for 15 years. She loved her job and cared deeply for her students. Many of the children came from poor families who struggled to make ends meet. Maria often kept extra pencils, notebooks, and snacks in her desk for students who needed them. This year, Maria noticed a boy named Louis who worried her. He was a bright 10-year-old with a quick smile, but lately he seemed tired and had trouble focusing in class. His clothes were clean but worn, and he was getting thinner. Maria had taught long enough to recognize the signs of a child who wasn't getting enough to eat. One Tuesday morning, Maria brought a bag of apples to class. I have too many apples from my tree at home, she announced. Would anyone like one for a snack? Several hands shot up, including Louis. Maria gave out the apples, making sure Louis got the biggest one. He ate it quickly, even the core. The next day, Maria brought extra sandwiches for lunch. My sister made too much food for a party, she explained. It would be a shame to waste these. Again, she made sure Louis got one. As the week went on, Maria found different excuses to bring food to share with the class. She noticed that Louis always accepted the offerings eagerly. On Friday, during recess, Maria overheard Louis talking to his friend Miguel in the hallway. My mom says we have to save the bread for dinner, Louis was saying. She gets paid next week, and then we can buy more food. Doesn't your dad help? Miguel asked. Louis shook his head. He left last year. Mom works 2 jobs now, but it's still hard. Maria's heart ached for Louis and his family. That evening after school, she went to the grocery store. She filled her cart with easy-to-prepare foods: bread, peanut butter, canned soups, pasta, cereal, and fruit. She added juice boxes, granola bars, and a box of cookies as a special treat. Using the school directory, Maria found Louis's address. It was in an apartment complex on the edge of town. She put the groceries in bags and drove there after dinner. Louis's mother, Elena, answered the door. She looked tired, with dark circles under her eyes. Behind her, Louis and a younger girl were sitting at a small table doing homework. Mrs. Gonzalez, Elena asked, surprised to see her son's teacher. Please call me Maria, she said with a warm smile. I'm sorry to bother you so late, but we had a small event at school today, and we have a lot of extra food. I thought your family might be able to use some of it. Elena hesitated, pride showing in her eyes. That's very kind, but it would really help me out, Maria said quickly. It would go to waste otherwise, and my refrigerator is already full. Louis had come to the door. "Mom, that's my teacher," he said excitedly. Seeing her son's face, Elena's expression softened. "Well, if it would help you out, we'd be grateful." Maria handed over the bags. "It's nothing special, just some basics." "Thank you," Elena said quietly. "Things have been difficult since my husband left. I'm working as much as I can, but sometimes it's not enough." "We all need help sometimes," Maria said. "The school has a food assistance program for families. I could bring you the forms on Monday." For a moment, tears welled in Elena's eyes. "That would be helpful. Thank you." "Mrs. Gonzalez, do you want to see my math test?" Louis asked, holding up a paper with a big 8 on it. "I got all the problems right." Maria smiled. "I'd love to see it." She stayed for 15 minutes, admiring Louis's schoolwork and meeting his sister Rosa. When she left, the grateful look in Elena's eyes told Maria everything she needed to know about the impact of her quiet kindness. The following Monday, Louis seemed more energetic in class. He raised his hand to answer questions and finished all his work. At lunch, he had a proper sandwich in his lunchbox. When he smiled at Maria across the classroom, she knew that her simple act had made a real difference. Tom was tired after a long day at work. The subway car was crowded with people heading home. He found a seat and closed his eyes, hoping to rest a little before his stop. The gentle rocking of the train almost put him to sleep. A small sound made him open his eyes. Across from him, a young woman was frantically searching through her bag. Her hands were shaking. Her eyes were wide with panic. She dumped the contents of her purse onto her lap. Keys, makeup, a phone with a cracked screen, tissues, and some coins. But whatever she was looking for wasn't there. Tom watched as tears filled her eyes. She quickly wiped them away, but more came. She started to put her things back into her bag. Her shoulders slumped in defeat. Tom wasn't sure if he should say anything. He didn't want to embarrass her, but she looked so upset that he couldn't just ignore her. "Excuse me," he said gently. "Are you okay? Can I help?" The woman looked up, surprised. She had dark hair and eyes that showed she hadn't slept much. Her voice broke. "I lost my wallet. It had all my money for this month's rent. I must have dropped it somewhere, or—" She didn't finish the sentence. The possibility that someone had stolen it was left unspoken. "How much was in it?" Tom asked. $800, she said. "I was going to pay my landlord today. It's already late, and he said if I don't pay by tomorrow, he'll start eviction." She tried to smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I'm Aisha, by the way." "I'm Tom." He made a quick decision. He reached into his jacket and took out his wallet. He counted out $800 and held it out to her. Aisha stared at the money, then at Tom's face. "What are you doing?" "I want to help," Tom said simply. "I can't take your money," she said. "You don't even know me." "Think of it as a loan," Tom suggested. "No interest, no rush to pay it back." Aisha shook her head. "Why would you do this for a stranger?" Tom thought about it. "Because someone once helped me when I needed it, and because it's the right thing to do." Aisha still hesitated. "How would I even pay you back?" Tom took out a business card from his wallet and placed it on top of the money. "I'm a graphic designer at this company. You can find me there when you're able to repay the loan. But only when you're ready, okay? No pressure." The train was slowing down for the next station. "This is my stop," Tom said. Aisha looked at the money, then at Tom. Slowly, she took the cash and the card. "I don't know what to say." "Just say you'll be okay," Tom replied with a smile. "I'll be okay," she repeated. "And I will pay you back. I promise." "I believe you," Tom said, standing as the train stopped. "Take care, Aisha." As he walked out of the subway station, Tom felt good. He wasn't rich, but he had enough to help someone in need. He knew there was a chance he would never see his money again, but that didn't matter to him. What mattered was that a person who needed help got it. 3 weeks later, Tom was working at his desk when the receptionist called. "There's someone named Aisha here to see you." Tom went to the lobby, where Aisha was waiting. She looked different, rested, less stressed. She was holding a small paper bag and an envelope. "I told you I'd pay you back," she said, handing him the envelope. Inside was $800 in cash. "Thank you for trusting me," Tom said. Aisha gave him the paper bag. "I also brought you some homemade cookies. It's not much, but I wanted to show my gratitude." "You didn't have to do that." "I wanted to," she said. "What you did, it wasn't just the money. It was believing in me when I couldn't believe in myself." They went for coffee that afternoon. Aisha told Tom how she had lost her job 2 months ago and was struggling to find a new one. Tom mentioned that his company was looking for an office assistant. A month later, Aisha started working at Tom's company. Sometimes kindness creates connections that last for years, all starting with one moment of trust between strangers. Sunset Hills Retirement Home was a nice place with clean rooms and kind staff. But for many of the old people who lived there, the days were long and quiet. They missed their homes, their old routines, and the busy lives they once had. Carlos was 22 years old and played the violin. He wasn't famous, but he loved music. He played in a small group with his friend Sofia, who played piano, and Marcus, who played guitar. They practiced together twice a week in Carlos's garage. One day, Carlos's grandmother suggested something. "Why don't you play at the retirement home where my friend Edith lives? The people there would love some music." Carlos thought it was a good idea. He called Sunset Hills and asked if they could perform there. The manager was very happy and invited them to play that Saturday. When Saturday came, Carlos, Sofia, and Marcus set up their instruments in the big common room. About 30 elderly residents came to listen. Some walked in slowly with canes. Others came in wheelchairs. They sat in a half circle, looking at the young musicians with curious eyes. "Good afternoon," Carlos said into the microphone. "We're happy to be here with you today. We hope you enjoy our music." They started with some classical pieces, then played some old songs from the 1940s and 1950s that Carlos thought the residents might remember from their youth. As they played, Carlos noticed one woman in the front row. She was small with white hair and bright blue eyes. She watched Carlos's violin with complete focus. When they played Moonlight Serenade, tears ran down her cheeks, but she was smiling. After the show, many residents came up to thank them. The woman with blue eyes waited until last. "That was beautiful," she said to Carlos. "I'm Mrs. Wilson. My husband played the violin for 50 years. He passed away last spring. Hearing you play his favorite songs brought him back to me for a little while." Carlos didn't know what to say. "I'm glad you enjoyed it." "Would you play Somewhere Over the Rainbow?" she asked. "That was our wedding song. Henry played it for me every anniversary." "I don't know it on violin," Carlos admitted, "but I could learn it for next time." "Next time?" Mrs. Wilson's face lit up. "You're coming back." "We'd like to," Carlos said. "Maybe once a month." The next time they came, Carlos started with Somewhere Over the Rainbow, just for Mrs. Wilson. Her smile was worth all the hours he had spent learning the song. Soon, other residents began making requests. Mr. Jenkins wanted big band music that reminded him of when he was a young soldier. Miss Rose loved opera arias that her mother used to sing. Mr. Bell requested jazz pieces from his days as a club owner in Chicago. Carlos and his friends started coming every week instead of once a month. They learned new songs for each visit. Sometimes they played for the whole group. Other times, they visited residents who were too sick to leave their rooms. Carlos noticed that the retirement home began to feel different. There was more laughter, more talking among the residents. People would discuss which songs to request next. Some even started a dancing group, where those who could still move well would dance while others watched and clapped along. 6 months after their first visit, the retirement home manager took Carlos aside. "I don't know how to thank you," she said. "Before you started coming, many residents rarely left their rooms. Now they look forward to music day all week. Some who hadn't spoken in months are singing along. Carlos looked across the room where Mrs. Wilson was talking animatedly with two other ladies about next week's songs. "I think we get as much from these visits as they do," he said. What had started as a one-time performance had become a highlight for everyone involved. The residents got to revisit cherished memories through music, and Carlos discovered that his violin could do more than make pretty sounds. It could build bridges between generations and bring joy to people who needed it most. Fatima's bakery sat on the corner of Maple and Oak Streets. It was a small shop with a big window that showed off her bread, cakes, and pastries. The smell of fresh baking filled the air around it every morning. For 10 years, people from all over town had come to buy Fatima's famous bread and sweet treats. Fatima loved her work. She woke up at 4 each morning to start the ovens and mix the dough. By 6, the first loaves of bread were golden brown and ready. Her assistant, Thomas, would arrive to help with the morning rush of customers buying breakfast on their way to work. When the pandemic hit the town, everything changed. Many shops closed. People lost their jobs. Fewer customers came to the bakery. Those who did come often counted their coins carefully before buying anything. One evening, as Fatima was closing the shop, she noticed how much bread and pastries were left unsold. Usually, she would take them home or give them to Thomas. But today, there was too much even for that. What a waste, she thought, looking at the perfectly good food. As she locked the door, Fatima saw Mrs. Garcia walking slowly past the shop. Mrs. Garcia was a widow who lived in the apartment building down the street. Her son had lost his job at the factory when it closed last month. "Mrs. Garcia," Fatima called, "would you like some bread and pastries? I made too many today." Mrs. Garcia looked surprised but grateful. "Are you sure, dear?" "Of course. They will only go stale by tomorrow." Fatima packed a bag with bread, cinnamon rolls, and cookies. Mrs. Garcia thanked her with tears in her eyes. That night, Fatima couldn't stop thinking about her neighbors. How many others were struggling to put food on their tables. The next day, she made her usual amount of bread and pastries, even though she knew not all would sell. After closing, Fatima filled 5 paper bags with the extra food. She wrote family names on each bag: the Garcias, the Smiths, the Nguyen's, the Johnsons, and old Mr. Murphy, who lived alone. Quietly, she left the bags on their doorsteps, then walked away without knocking. This became Fatima's secret routine. Each day, she would choose different families who she knew were having hard times. She never mentioned her gifts when she saw these people in town, but she noticed how Mrs. Smith's children looked less thin and how Mr. Johnson stood a little straighter, his eyes less worried. 1 month later, Fatima woke up with a fever and a bad cough. The doctor told her to stay home for 2 weeks. Thomas offered to run the bakery, but Fatima worried about money. With fewer customers, the shop was barely making enough to pay for flour and sugar, let alone rent. On her 3rd day at home, Fatima heard a knock on her door. When she opened it, no one was there, but on her doorstep sat a basket of fresh fruit, soup in a container, and a get-well card signed by the Garcias. The next day, Mrs. Smith brought over a homemade casserole. Mr. Johnson cleared the snow from her walkway without being asked. The Nguyen children made her colorful pictures to brighten her room. Mr. Murphy, who had little money, brought her his special tea that helped with coughs. Every day for 2 weeks, someone from the neighborhood brought food, medicine, or simply called to check on her. No one mentioned the bags of bread and pastries she had left on their doorsteps. They didn't need to. Kindness had created a circle that came back to Fatima when she needed it most. When Fatima finally returned to her bakery, she found that Thomas had kept it running smoothly. Even more surprising, many customers had prepaid for bread and pastries to help keep the shop open during her illness. "People have been so kind," she told Thomas, her eyes filling with tears. "You were kind first," he said simply. "Kindness always finds its way back home." The airport was packed with angry people. A big storm had stopped all flights. Hundreds of travelers were stuck there for the night. The airline workers looked tired as they tried to help everyone. James sat in an uncomfortable chair, checking his watch. His business meeting was early tomorrow, and now he might miss it. Around him, people talked loudly on phones or argued with airline staff. No one was happy. Near him, a young mother tried to calm her crying baby. She looked exhausted, bouncing the baby while trying to find something in her diaper bag. The baby cried louder. Some travelers gave the woman annoyed looks. James watched as the mother's eyes filled with tears. She was at her breaking point. He remembered when his own kids were babies and how hard travel had been even with his wife's help. This woman was all alone. He got up and walked to the coffee shop, which had a long line. After 15 minutes, he returned with 2 large coffees. "Excuse me," he said to the young mother. "I thought you might need this." She looked up, surprised. "For me?" "You look like you've had a long day," James said, offering the cup. "It's just regular coffee with cream and sugar." "Thank you," she said, taking the coffee with her free hand. "That's so kind of you." "I'm James," he said. "My kids are grown now, but I remember those days." "I'm Mia, and this is Emma," she said, nodding at the baby who was still fussing. "It's her first flight, or it was supposed to be. Would you like me to hold her for a minute so you can drink your coffee?" James offered. Mia hesitated, then handed Emma to him. James held the baby with practiced ease, talking to her softly. To Mia's surprise, Emma's cries turned to hiccups, then stopped. The baby looked up at James with big, curious eyes. "You're good with babies," Maya said, sipping her coffee gratefully. 4 kids and 6 grandchildren, James explained with a smile. Lots of practice. Across the terminal, an elderly man struggled with his heavy bags. He had been in line for help for a long time, but the airline staff was too busy to notice him. Maya saw this and made a decision. "Would you mind watching Emma for just 1 more minute?" she asked James. "Not at all," he said. Mia walked over to the elderly man. "Can I help you with your bags, sir?" The man looked relieved. "Thank you, dear. My wife usually helps me, but she passed last month. This is my first time traveling alone." Mia helped him move his bags to a seat. The man thanked her and offered her a candy bar from his pocket. "Please take it," he insisted. "It's the only thing I have to give." Mia accepted the candy with a smile. When she returned to James and Emma, she broke the candy bar in half and shared it with him. A group of college students sat nearby, looking hungry. They had spent their food money on taxi rides to the airport, not knowing they would be stuck overnight. The elderly man noticed their whispered concerns about food. Without saying anything, he took out a lunchbox his daughter had packed for him and shared his sandwiches with the students. One of the students, a girl with bright red hair, was so grateful that she offered to help others. She was good with technology, so she helped a confused older woman reset her phone password. The older woman then gave up her blanket to a shivering child. All through the night, small acts of kindness spread across the terminal like ripples in water. People shared food, phone chargers, and stories. Someone started a game of charades that had a whole corner of the airport laughing. A man with a guitar played soft music. Children who had been crying fell asleep to gentle lullabies. By morning, when the storm cleared and flights resumed, something had changed. People who had been strangers now exchanged phone numbers and hugs. The night that could have been a nightmare had become something special. "It's amazing," Maya said to James as they prepared to board their different flights. "How one small kindness can start something so big." James smiled as he waved goodbye to baby Emma. That's how the world changes. Not all at once, but one small act at a time.